Hello sports fans, welcome to Spear Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 14 NFL predictions. So last week in Week 13, I had a decent week going 8-8, and that brings my record on the season to 128-65. But kicking things off this week on Thursday Night Football, we've got the Cowboys at the Lions. And this is a pretty interesting game, and this is a big game for the NFC wildcard race. Because the Cowboys, they're playing pretty well, and they've won 3 games in a row, and they're currently 6-5-1, and they have the 9th seed in the NFC. And the Lions, they're currently 7-5, and they have the 8th seed in the NFC. But both these teams are obviously on the outside looking in, and both teams need to win this game. But this game should be a pretty good game. The offense for the Cowboys, they're great, as they're second best in the NFL, scoring 29.3 points per game, and Dak Prescott also leads the NFL with an average of 271 passing yards per game. The Cowboys offense, they match up against the Lions defense that is okay, as the Lions, they're allowing 22.8 points per game, and their average against the pass, as they're allowing 212 passing yards per game, which ranks 17th in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Lions is also great, as they're scoring 29.2 points per game, which is tied for 3rd, and they face the Cowboys defense that is not good, as they're 2nd worst in the NFL, allowing 28.5 points per game. Although the Cowboys defense has been a lot better since the trade deadline, as since the deadline, they're allowing just 21.6 points per game. But this is going to be a fun game, and I think we're going to see a lot of points scored here, because these are two of the highest scoring teams in the NFL. And I can definitely see the Cowboys getting the win here because their defense has been a lot better recently. But I'm going to take the Lions to get the win. They just don't lose back-to-back games. In fact, they've actually been alternating wins and losses since Week 6. So based on that, they would be on pace for a win this week. And I think that happens. They don't lose back-to-back games. They're at home, and I just think the Lions are the better overall team. This could go either way, but I've got the Lions in a higher scoring game, 30-27. Moving to the games on Sunday, beginning with the Seahawks at the Falcons. So the Seahawks, they look great. They're 9-3, and they just destroyed the Vikings last week. And then face a Falcons team that's not very good, as they're 4-8, and last week they lost to the Jets. But I don't really think this game is going to be that good. The Falcons' offense is not very good, scoring just 20 points per game, and they're not going to do much against the elite Seahawks defense that shut out the Vikings last week, and they're 3rd in the NFL, allowing just 18.1 points per game. And then on the flip side, it's also pretty one-sided. The Seahawks, they're tied for 3rd best in terms of scoring offense, putting up 29.2 points per game. And the Falcons' defense is nothing too impressive, allowing 23 points per game. Although the Falcons' defense is pretty good against the pass, so maybe they can slow down Sam Darnold. But I don't really think this game is that close. I've got the Seahawks with the easy win. I think their offense continues to play well. I think their defense dominates again. And I've got the Seahawks by a score of 27-10. Up next, we got the Toilet Bowl. We got the Titans at the Browns. And this is a pretty bad game, as we've got the 1-11 Titans against the Browns, who are not much better, as they're just 3-9. But this game probably is going to be very good. And this game's probably going to be pretty well scored because both these teams are terrible offensively. As the offense of the Titans is actually worst in the NFL, putting up just 14.2 points per game, and the Browns' offense isn't much better, with only 16.2 points per game. But while both offenses are pretty bad, there's always something interesting to watch with the offenses, and that's both rookie quarterbacks, with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. But while neither offense is good, there's a major difference on the defensive side of the ball. As the Browns' defense is actually pretty good, as they're allowing just 22.5 points per game, compared to the Titans, allowing over 27 points per game. Plus, the Browns' defensive line is great, and Cam Ward is the most sacked quarterback in the NFL, so that is not a good matchup for the Titans. But I'm going to take the Browns to get the win here. I think their defense, specifically their defensive line, is the difference in this game. I've got the Browns in a low-scoring game, winning by a score of 20-13. Up next, we got the Commanders at the Vikings. This is a pretty interesting game, even though neither team's very good, as the Vikings are just 4-8, and the Commanders are 3-9. But both these teams are also dealing with injuries at the quarterback position. As for the Commanders, Jayden Daniels could come back this week from his elbow injury, although he's still not cleared for contact, but he could get cleared before this week's game. But if Daniels can't go, then it would be Marcus Mariota at quarterback once again. And then for the Vikings, J.J. McCarthy is going to return from his concussion, which cost him last week's game. And even though McCarthy is terrible, he's still definitely an upgrade over Max Brosmer, who threw 4 picks last week. But this game's probably not going to be great. On the offensive side of the ball for the Vikings, they've been pretty bad, scoring just 18.7 points per game. And they've also turned the ball over 26 times, which is most in the NFL. And then they'll face a Commanders defense that is not good, as they're allowing 27 points per game. But the Commanders defense doesn't force a ton of turnovers, as they've only forced 7 on the season, which is 2nd fewest in the week. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Commanders, without Jayden Daniels, they really haven't been that bad, although they haven't been great either, as they're putting up about 21.8 points per game. And they face a Vikings defense that's allowing 23.4 points per game. But I really have no idea who to pick here. The Commanders, they have looked a little bit better as of late, and they almost beat the Broncos last week. But the Vikings, they're at home, they've got to win eventually. And I think they could win this game as long as they can protect the football. And I think they should be able to do that because obviously this is the Commanders' defense that doesn't force many turnovers. So I'm going to take the Vikings to get the win and beat the Commanders by a score of 23-20, but this is a game that can definitely go either way. Moving on, we've got the Dolphins at the Jets. This is another game that's not very good. The Jets, they're just 3-9, although they did win last week against the Falcons. And the Dolphins also aren't great, as they're 5-7, but they have been better recently, as they've won 3 straight and 4 of their last 5. But the offense for the Dolphins still is not very good. They're only scoring about 20.6 points per game, but they have been running the ball effectively, as Devon Achane has 3 straight games where he's run for at least 120 yards. And I definitely think Devon Achane can have another big game for the Dolphins, because this is a Jets defense that can't really stop the run, plus they're just not good overall, allowing over 26 points per game. Now, on the other side, the Dolphins' defense isn't great, as they're allowing about 24 points per game, but the Jets' offense is also not very good, scoring about 20 points per game. But I'm going to take the Dolphins to get the win here. They've been playing a little bit better as of late. I think they run the football effectively. I think that's the difference. And I've got the Dolphins with the win by a score of 24-18. Moving on, I've got the Saints at the Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers, they got a much-needed win last week as they snapped their 3-game losing streak and they beat the Cardinals. And they're now 7-5 on the season. And they should be able to make that 8-5 because they face a Saints team that's one of the worst teams in the NFL, as they're 2-10. But the Buccaneers offense, they're pretty good, putting up 23.3 points per game. And they got a little bit healthier last week as Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin both came back from injury. And I think the Buccaneers offense will have another nice offensive game because they face the Saints defense that is nothing great. Now on the flip side, the Saints offense is bad. They're third worst in the NFL, scoring just 15.2 points per game. And even though the Buccaneers defense is allowing over 25 points per game, I don't think the Saints offense is going to be able to keep up. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers to get the win here very easily. I've got them with the win by a score of 27-14. Up next, we've got the Colts at the Jaguars. And this is one of the bigger games this week, as we've got the Jaguars who are 8-4 in first place in the AFC South, against the Colts who are also 8-4, although they have fallen from first place in the AFC South, and they've also lost 3 of their last 4 games. But this game is going to be very interesting, and something that makes this game even better is this game is in Jacksonville, a place where the Colts have not won since 2014. But this is going to be a great game. On the offensive side of the ball for the Colts, they're best in the NFL, putting up 29.8 points per game, but the offense has been a big part of their recent struggles, as they were averaging 34 points per game in their first 8 games, but over their last 4 games, they're scoring just 21 points per game. And a big reason why the offense hasn't been as good has been their run game. As in their 3 most recent losses, Jonathan Taylor is rushing for just 62 yards per game, and he's not found the end zone in any of those games. And the Colts offense, they don't get a great matchup this week, because they face a Jaguar defense that is pretty good, and I really don't like this matchup, because the Jaguars defense is allowing 21 points per game, and they've got the number 1 defense against the run, allowing just 82 rushing yards per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Jaguars, they're pretty good. They're scoring 24.3 points per game, and they're much better running the football than throwing the football, as Trevor Lawrence hasn't exactly been great, with 16 touchdowns and 11 picks this season. But the Jaguars' offense, they face the Colts' defense that is pretty much the exact opposite. They're allowing about 21 points per game, and they're good defending the run, but they're the 6th worst defense against the pass. But this is really an interesting matchup, and a game I can definitely see going either way, but I'm going to take the Jaguars to get the win for a few reasons. 1, this game is in Jacksonville, and the Colts just can't win there. 2, I think the Jaguars are trending up, the Colts are trending down. I think both those trends will continue. And the third reason, I just don't trust the Colts offense when they're not going to be able to run the football effectively. And I do think the Jaguars will do a good job containing Jonathan Taylor, considering they do have the best run defense in the NFL. But I'm going to take the Jaguars to get the win here. This is definitely a game that could go either way, but I've got the Jaguars with a big win, getting the win by a score of 24-20. Up next, we got the Steelers against the Ravens. And this is another big game, and this is a huge game for the AFC North, as the Steelers and Ravens are both 6-6 and tied for first place in the division. But the offense for the Steelers is nothing amazing. They're scoring 23.4 points per game, and last week they scored just 7 against the Bills. And then they'll face a Ravens defense that is allowing 24.4 points per game, but they've been playing a lot better since they moved Kyle Hamilton into the box, as since that happened, they're allowing just 16.5 points per game. Now, on the other side, the offense for the Ravens is pretty good. They're putting up 24.1 points per game, although last week they had one of their worst games of the season with Lamar Jackson, as they scored just 14 against a bad Bengal defense. But I think the Ravens will be able to bounce back this week because the Steelers' defense isn't playing that well, and they can't stop the pass, and last week they allowed nearly 250 rushing yards. But I'm going to take the Ravens to get the win here. I think they'll have their way offensively. I think that's going to lead them to the win, and I just don't trust the Steelers' offense, especially against a Ravens defense that is playing pretty well. So I'm going to take the Ravens to get the win here very convincingly by a score of 26-13. Up next, we've got the Bengals at the Bills, and this is another pretty big game. As the Bengals, they're 4-8, and they won last week in the return of Joe Burrow. and they have a chance to make the playoffs if they win out and go 9-8. And winning out would obviously include winning this week, and that is not going to be easy because they have to go to Buffalo and play a Bills team to 8-4. But this game should be pretty good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Bengals, they were great last week with 32 points, and now that Joe Burrow's healthy, they're obviously one of the best offenses in the NFL. But they gave a very interesting matchup this week against the Bills defense that is allowing 21.6 points per game, and they're terrible against the run, but the Bills are actually the number one defense against the pass, allowing just 163 passing yards per game. Now, on the other side, the offense for the Bills is also great. They're putting up 28.1 points per game, and they lead the NFL with 155 rush yards per game, and they also ran for 249 last week against the Steelers. And the Bills offense, they face a Bengal defense that is not good, as they're worse than the NFL, allowing 31.2 points per game, and they're the second worst run defense in the league, allowing 153 rushing yards per game. Although the Bengals defense did play pretty well last week, as they held the Ravens to just 14. But this is going to be a higher scoring game due to how good both teams are offensively, and because of that, I definitely think the Bengals could win this game, because they can definitely outscore any team in the NFL. Now, if it's a defensive game, their defense can't consistently get stops, but if it's a shootout, they definitely have a chance. But this is going to be a really tough game to predict, and this is going to be a fun, entertaining game, because we're going to see a lot of points scored. But I'm still going to take the Bills to get the win. They're at home, and I think their offense is a great matchup with how effectively they should be able to run the football against a terrible run defense. So I'm going to take the Bills, but this game can definitely go either way. But I've got the Bills by a score of 31-28. Up next, we've got the Broncos at the Raiders. The Broncos, they're 10-2, and coming off a close win against the Commanders. And they face the Raiders, who are one of the worst teams in the NFL at 2-10. But when these teams met a few weeks ago, the Broncos won just 10-7, so maybe this game can be close once again. But the Broncos offense, they've been pretty good, putting up 23.7 points per game. And I think they're going to have a nice game against a Raiders defense that is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And then on the flip side, the Raiders offense is second worst in the league, scoring just 14.9 points per game. Plus, they've allowed 46 sacks, which is second worst in the NFL. And that is a terrible matchup against this Broncos defense, which is fourth in the NFL, allowing 18.2 points per game. And they also lead the league in sacks with 51. But I know the first game between these teams was close, and now this game, it's in Las Vegas, but I don't think this game is close. I think this game's a lot more one-sided, and I've got the Broncos absolutely dominating and winning 27-6. Up next, we've got the Bears at the Packers. And this is another huge game for the playoff race, as the Bears, they're currently 9-3 and in first place in the NFC North, and they also currently have the top seed in the NFC. But the Packers, they're right behind them, as they're 8-3-1, and they currently have the 6th seed in the NFC. But this game should be pretty good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Packers, they're good but not great, as they're putting up 24.5 points per game. And Jordan Love played really well last week with 4 touchdowns, and that makes a lot of sense because the Toyotathon started. But Jordan Love and the Packers offense, they face a Bears defense that isn't the greatest, as they're allowing 25.6 points per game, and they're also allowing 359 total yards per game, which is 6th worst in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Bears is pretty good. They're scoring a little over 26 points per game, and they've got a great run game with 153 rushing yards per game, which is second best in the NFL, and they also ran for over 280 last week against the Eagles. But the Bears offense, they match up against a great Packer defense that is 6th in the NFL, allowing just 18.8 points per game, plus they've got a good run defense, allowing under 100 rushing yards per game. But this is another tough game to predict, and a game I can definitely see going either way. Now, this is probably going to be a close game, and the Bears, they've been great in one-score games this season, but I'm going to take the Packers to get the win. I just trust their defense a little bit more. I think they'll be able to contain this Bears run game. Plus, the Packers, they're at home, and I think their offense is going to continue to play pretty well against a defense that really isn't the greatest. So I'm going to take the Packers to get the win here in a close game, 27-22, but a game that can definitely go their way. Moving on, we've got the Rams at the Cardinals. The Rams, they're coming off a loss to the Panthers, and they're 9-3. And they're looking to bounce back, and they should be able to against a Cardinals team that is not very good, as they're just 3-9. But this game shouldn't really be that close. The Rams' offense is great, scoring 27.8 points per game, and they were pretty good last week with 28 points despite turning the ball over 3 times. And I think the Rams, as long as they can protect the football, they'll have a nice game this week because the Cardinals' defense is allowing over 25 points a game. And then on the flip side, the Rams' defense is elite, as they're second in the NFL, allowing 17.5 points a game, and the Cardinals' offense is not great, which is 22 points per game. But I've got the Rams winning this game pretty easily. I don't really think it's too close. I've got the Rams 30-17. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, and we've got the Chiefs hosting the Texans. And we'll have a wild watch rate for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is another huge game for the AFC playoff race. The Texans, they're playing pretty well as they're 7-5, and they've won 4 games in a row. But they're currently the first team out of the playoffs in the AFC, as they've got the 8th seed. And then for the Chiefs, they're 6-6, and they've not been playing too well, losing 3 of their last 4 games. And if the playoffs started today, they would obviously not be in the playoffs as they've got the 10th seed, and they've got a lot of work to do. But this game should be pretty good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Chiefs, they're good, scoring 25.4 points per game, and Patrick Mahomes is third in the NFL with 3,238 passing yards. But the Chiefs' offense, they get a really tough matchup against an elite Texans defense, as Texans defense is the #1 scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 16.5 points per game, and they've also got the 4th best defense against the pass, allowing just 174 passing yards per game. And something else to watch is a banged-up Chiefs offensive line against a great Texans pass rush. As the Chiefs, they're going to be without rookie left tackle Josh Simmons, who's out with a wrist injury, and right tackle Juwan Taylor might not play as he's questionable. And that is not a good matchup because they face a Texans pass rush that is elite, especially off the edge. As Daniel Hunter has 11 sacks and Will Anderson Jr. has 10.5, and the Texans are the only team in the NFL with 2 players who have at least 10 sacks. Now, on the other side, the offense for the Texans, they've been okay. They're scoring about 22 points per game, and they face a great Chiefs defense along 19.3 points per game. But this is another really tough game to predict, and a game I could definitely see going either way. But I do think this game is going to be very well scoring. Both these teams are elite defensively, and I do think the Chiefs do have the slightly better offense, and I do trust their offense a little bit more than I trust the Texans. But I just don't think the Chiefs' offense is going to do much because this Texans defensive line is going to dominate. So I'm going to take the Texans to get the win. I think this is a low-scoring game. I think their defense, specifically their defensive line, leads them to the win. And I've got the Texans winning a low-scoring game, 19-13. And our final game, we've got the Eagles at the Chargers on Monday Night Football. And we will also have a live watch party for this game. That will start by 8:15 Eastern Time on Monday. So again, I hope to see you guys there. But this is another pretty interesting game. The Chargers, they're currently 8-4 and coming off a dominant win over the Raiders. And the Eagles, they're also 8-4, although they've lost back-to-back games. But this is a pretty interesting matchup. On the offensive side for the Eagles, they're pretty bad. They're scoring just 22.5 points per game, and they've been terrible over their last 4 games, scoring just 15 points per game in that 4-game span. And then they'll face a great Chargers defense that is allowing 21 points per game, and they're also allowing just 275 total yards per game, which is 3rd fewest in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Chargers is solid. They're scoring about 23 points per game, although they might be without Justin Herbert after he underwent surgery to repair a broken bone in his left hand. But the Chargers offense, they face an Eagles defense that's pretty good, giving up 20.8 points per game. But this is another really tough game to predict, and it's really tough because we don't know if Justin Herbert's going to play. And I think this is going to be a low-scoring game because both these teams are great defensively, and I think this game really just comes down to who makes more plays offensively. While the Eagles' offense is pretty bad, it could be them, especially if the Chargers are without Justin Herbert. But if the Chargers have Herbert, I trust their offense a little bit more. So what I'm going to say, if the Chargers have Justin Herbert, I'm going to take them to get the win by a score of 21-16. But if the Chargers don't have Justin Herbert, I'm going to take the Eagles by a score of 20-9. But those are my Week 14 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think will win some of this week's big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.